Okay, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Don Clemmer. I'm a sales engineer with Parallels, and we're going to be talking about Parallels Remote Application Server and Windows Virtual Desktop today. We're going to start off just with a quick overview of Parallels, just in case there's anybody out there that hasn't heard of us. We'll very briefly touch on the digital transformation that we're all experiencing now. And then we'll get into the meat of this, which is the Parallels Remote Application Server product and Windows Virtual Desktop. We'll do a demo, and then we'll do a little Q&A and wrap up. Okay, so quick word about Parallels. We've been around for a while. We're a global presence, sell in over 140 countries. We have offices around the world, 5,000 plus channel partners in many, many different countries and localities around the world. A large number of the Fortune 500 and Global 500, for that matter, do use our products. Individually, on the consumer side, we've got over 7 million people that have bought the products, one of our products or another, and then that also includes over 50,000 plus businesses, including some very large names that I'm sure everybody would recognize. Okay, if we take a look at the portfolio that we have, obviously today we're going to be talking about Parallels Remote Application Server, which is an all-in-one remote application delivery and VDI solution, providing access from anywhere, from any device, so that you essentially can work remotely if you need to. On top of that, we also have what we're best known for is Parallels Desktop for Mac. It's essentially run Windows on your Mac is the tagline, although you can actually run applications from almost any operating system on your Mac as well. The nice thing about it is it runs seamlessly, so you don't have to reboot like using Boot Camp. You just have a Windows app open on one side of your screen and then a Apple Mac app on another side of your screen, and you can switch back and forth just as if everything was running native on the Mac. And we've recently extended that capability to Parallels Desktop for Chromebook, which means if you've got a fairly high-end or reasonably high-end Chromebook device, you actually can run Windows on the Chromebook as well, doing the same type of thing. So that's available. We can provide Mac management if you have a Microsoft SCCM implementation in place. So if you're using SCCM to manage your workstation and IT environment, we actually can go ahead and extend that to manage Macs as well. And then in addition to that, we have a couple of products, Parallels Access, which allows you to essentially remotely access your desktop, whether that's a PC or Mac, from pretty much anywhere in any device. Very popular use for that is you can use your phone or your tablet to do that. We have a very impressive, client running on those that allows you to use native touch gestures, so you can make very precise mouse clicks, virtual keyboard, the whole 9 yards, using just your finger. You don't have to carry on a mouse or a keyboard or anything to do that. You can just whip out your phone and then access your computer from there. And then Parallels Toolbox, which is available both in a Windows and Mac edition, has a set of very powerful tools to let you do a variety of very useful things, from just simply downloading a video over the internet to there's one that actually will suppress alerts and sounds, put your computer in presentation mode, if you will. It's really great if you're running a webinar and don't want a bunch of pop-ups happening while you're in the middle of that. Okay, so digital transformation, well, we're kind of in the middle of all this, right? We've been having a global pandemic. Everybody suddenly had to work from home very suddenly. We've mostly kind of figured that out by this point, although there are still a lot of people trying to figure out better ways to do that. But I think the key thing here is to look forward. There's some 48% of employees will want to continue working remotely even after this ends. And that's really not the real number, to be honest with you. We've done some surveys and even just some informal internal polling on our own end, and it's actually a much higher number than that of people that want to work remotely at least some of the time. I'm not sure that many of us will ever go back into the office full time. I highly doubt that I will. We will have people that now that they're enabled to work from home or looking for ways to work from home, have gotten a little bit used to it. And then while we miss the camaraderie and the extra things that the office does give us, it might be nice to be able to work from home 1, 2, or 3 days a week just to kind of save on the commute and the flexibility and everything else. So I don't think that's going away. We couple that with this new option for Microsoft on WVD, essentially using Windows 10 Virtual Desktop as one way is to use it in multi-user mode as a terminal server, which provides some additional application compatibility. You also could kind of integrate Microsoft's offering into their VDI type environment, etc. So that's got some nice, exciting things going on there. And then, of course, even beyond that, data security. I mean, we always keep hearing about data security, meaning, oh, we're always worried about data security, threats are always increasing, but it's because they are. They're always increasing, and that's always a true statement. And then in this work from home environment, we actually do need to pay even more attention about that as we send things across the wires. So we need to be able to, we can't just keep everything behind our firewall anymore, or at least all our end users behind our firewall, right? That ship has sailed. They're now working remotely. They're moving around, and while we can keep the data and everything behind the firewall, we need to figure out a way to make sure that we keep that off the end user's device, and that's what remote computing really is kind of all about. Okay, so to take advantage of the WVD initiative that Microsoft has, we've been working very closely with them. We've got our development team synced up with their initiatives. We've been working with their project managers. And we have a nice quote here from Sandeep Patnaik, the principal project manager, or PM manager, excuse me, at Microsoft. Parallels RAS integration with Windows Virtual Desktop ensures optimized service delivery while providing a unified end-user experience. So essentially, he's saying it simplifies the Windows Virtual Desktop deployment and provides our centralized management capabilities that RAS gives you, including things such as auto-scaling, taking advantage of the FS Logic's profile containers, automated image optimization, and there's a whole bunch of other things that RAS does. And Microsoft has recognized that, and that's one of the reasons why we kind of work so closely together. Okay. So why Parallels in Windows Virtual Desktop? What do some of those things mean that I just said? If we get down to kind of the nitty and gritty and put some oomph behind it instead of just kind of words. Well, the first thing to think about when I always think about WVD is it's not kind of it's not necessarily a replacement type solution. It's in addition to. Parallels RAS can deliver remote desktop servers or terminal servers if you prefer the old name. We can deliver VDI, and we can do all of that under a single license. There's no Advanced Enterprise Platinum Plus Data Center Edition from Parallels. It's one license, and you get the entirety of the product to do as what you like. And now we've added the capabilities of WVD with that as well. So if we go way back in time and think about when Microsoft first came out with what was called terminal services back then, right, in Windows 2000, sadly, I'm old enough to remember that. That was able to reach a large number of customers. It was really kind of enterprise, the idea of remote computing in on the Windows platform. And then we started hearing a few years later about this new initiative. At the time, it was new, called VDI. And VDI was never meant to be a replacement for terminal services or remote desktop services. It was supposed to be an addition to. That's always the way it was designed, or that at least was the original initiative by all the players involved there, right? The terminal services approach or the remote desktop services approach, whichever word you prefer, was in 100% of the Fortune 500 in the United States, but it only reached maybe 10-15% of the users. VDI was a way to perhaps reach another 5 to 10, maybe 20% of the users on top of that by extending the capabilities of remote computing and extending that reach. WVD does that yet again. It provides even more capabilities to extend that out with things like multi-user Windows 10 and application compatibility and so forth. So all this is about reaching more and more and more of the employees that are out there. And then what Parallels brings to the table with this is the ability, of course, to diminish the cost and complexities of the infrastructure management, right? It's not, the tools aren't just there for everybody to come out and set up and do this. It takes a lot of work, and we allow you to centrally manage the workloads via an intuitive single pane of glass admin console, right? And it allows you as IT people to not have to be experts in every last little thing to be able to create this type of environment. It does a lot of that work for you, which is extremely important because the last time I checked, I hadn't talked to a single IT person who said he had all the time in the world to look into research everything that they wanted to do. It just doesn't happen. It's the nature of the beast. But we make that a lot simpler and easier to manage for you. So if you have reasonably good Windows administration skills, or at least somebody on your staff that does, you'll be able to run Parallels Remote Application Server and then take advantage of remote desktop servers, WVD, VDI, etc. right? And we also can optimize the Azure cloud consumption without auto-scaling. So we can automatically deploy, generate, and delete new virtual machines, whether they're RDSH servers, WVD, or VDI instances, whatever. Scale up and scale down, or I guess you like to, the cloud providers like to say scale in instead of scale down. Essentially, create them when you need them and then delete them when you're not using them, right? Save the billing and resources in the cloud, but we can do that. And we can support a hybrid architecture. So Parallels RAS runs perfectly fine on-prem at home, or it runs perfectly fine in the cloud. If you've got an on-prem environment already in your data center, but you want to start taking advantage of WVD, which exists only in Microsoft Azure, you could create kind of a hybrid deployment, right? So you can run components on-prem and then run the components that you need to in the cloud, and you can kind of extend your architecture like that. Parallels can take advantage of that across many clouds, by the way, but WVD, which is what we're talking about today, is of course an Azure specific solution. And then I mentioned FSLogix earlier, or I guess the Microsoft Project Manager mentioned FSLogix earlier. What that is, if you haven't heard of it, is it's profile management. So back in the day, we had roaming user profiles with Windows. It worked, but it was kind of ugly, and you probably didn't see me with my air quotes around the word work. And sadly, it'll always be with us. It'll never completely go away, although we'd like it to. The replacement for that was to use some kind of a profile container management, and there was a solution that Microsoft had called UPD, Universal Profile Disk. Effectively, what that does is it stores all the user's profile data in a virtual hard disk, and then we would mount that virtual hard disk underneath the profile. The users wouldn't see any of this. It just happens seamlessly to them. They're just saving things on their desktop in their documents folder. They're creating shortcuts on their desktop. They're creating favorites in their browsers, changing their wallpaper if you give them access to the full desktop, all that stuff that gets saved in the profile. But all that now is actually getting written to a virtual hard disk, and the virtual hard disk exists on a centralized server that you can control and back up as an IT administrator. So you're getting all that user stuff off of the server or off the VDI instance or off the WVD instance now. However, Microsoft purchased a company called FSLogix fairly recently, in the last year or so. FSLogix is like those UPDs, but it's on steroids. It's much more powerful, gives you much greater granularity and control, and superior profile management solution in that. Right? It also has some advanced features such as automatic kind of file locking. So if you have users logging in from two different devices at once, they're not overwriting the same file twice simultaneously, right? That would tend to be bad. So it does all sorts of things like that. We in Parallels have created some integration with FSLogix right into the product to make it a little bit easier and seamless to set up, because you can do it again from our console in the single pane of glass. I'll show you how that works in terms of the setup when we do in the demo. The other piece of the pie about FSLogix is it's really nice in that it's free. Right? If you're using VDI client access licenses or RDSH client access licenses or CALs or VDA licensing, which is the VDA, the virtual desktop access license, you also get the license with WVD. If you're running, I think, Office 365 business licenses, you also have access to this. So pretty much everybody already has licenses capabilities already for FSLogix, so it doesn't require extra cost for you. We've seamlessly integrated that into Parallels, and now you've got this great profiles container FSLogix support that you can use for your profiles. Okay, and then all of this that we're doing on the back end means nothing unless it works for the end users, right? Unless they are able to use it and maintain their productivity, what's the point of doing this? And so we provide an outstanding user experience to the to your end users, right? We can deliver Windows 10 WVD seamlessly and securely. They got an outstanding native user experience and very quick and easy for them to kind of get up and running. And they have the capability of interacting with their local devices if you want, without you having to really do anything as an admin. So if they're working from home and they want to print and they got a printer in their house, they can just go to File, Print, and print from whether it's the remote application, the remote desktop, or whatever, and they pick their printer and it'll come right out that printer. You as an IT person have not had to install drivers on the server or in the VDI instance, or on WVD. You don't have to use universal drivers or generic drivers or anything like that. It just works right out of the box. Same thing with local file access. If they need to save things locally, and whether it's a USB key or on their local hard disk or whatever, to transfer files in and out of this environment, they can do that. And we've created a tool, built-in accelerated file retrieval in there. What does that mean? Well, we're using the RDP, the Microsoft RDSH, whatever, for file transfer, so you go to File, Save As, you're presented with a File Explorer window, and you see my drives on my local system, and I start browsing through those, and I browse through the tree, and we've all done that, and it's painful and takes forever. It works, but boy, is it slow. Well, we've speeded that process up with some really cool caching technologies we've added. So now you can browse that local file tree pretty quickly, figure out where you want to save the files, and then when they save it, the file transfer happens many, many, many times faster than it would have without using Parallels. Now, that said, we have a robust set of policies within Parallels, and you can turn that on or off. So if you don't want anybody transferring stuff up and down off the server or the remote workspace, shut it off. They won't be able to do it. You control that centrally. Same with printing and scanning. If you want them to use a local printer or scanner, you can turn it on. If you want to turn it off because you don't want anything coming out, you certainly can do that. And you can create different policies for different users. Some users can save locally and print. Maybe somebody else can print but not save. You can pick and choose how you want to do that. And the one other line in there that I want to call attention to is the session pre-launch capabilities. The idea of this is, let's say you have an environment where everybody logs on at 8 a.m. in the morning, right? You don't have to worry about commutes anymore. Roll out of bed, we get up, have a quick bite to eat, and at 8 a.m. we all log in. Well, guess what? That creates kind of a login storm in your environment, and then the users have to wait as you've got CPU spikes in your workstation, on your server infrastructure, even if it's in the cloud. And then the other thing is they're waiting for group policy to apply and everything else, and it takes a few minutes to get logged in. Well, with session pre-launch, we actually have machine learning built into Parallels Remote Application Server. We'll figure out that users usually log in at this specific time, and then we will start logging them in ahead of time. Okay, so maybe starting at like 5 in the morning or something, or 6 in the morning, we'll start initiating these logins. And then that way, when users come in and they go to log in, they're not really logging into a new session. That's already been done. They're just connecting to an established session, and we can do that very securely. It is very quick for them because they're just connecting to something that's already running, and it takes stress off your compute environment because you're not having to have all these logins get processed at once. We've spread that out to make it a little bit easier. So that's also another very powerful tool that we can provide. Beyond that, I've kind of talked about the unified integration where you can configure all virtual workloads from a centralized console, right? Single pane of glass. If I want to do WVD, if I want to do VDI, if I want to do remote desktop services, you do all that from the Parallels admin console right there, one pane of glass. You don't have to use different tools to do that. You also don't have to download different product versions or different products from us. It's a single product, a single license that does everything, right? And by the way, when I talk about a single license, I mean it includes everything. It's licensed purely by concurrent user, the number of users, not even named users, but just the total number of users that you have connecting. And once you have that, you can use the entirety of the product if you want. So if you want to go 100% WVD, go for it. If you want to mix and match at different users and different classes of users, get a different type of solution, you have the ability and the luxury of doing that. So you can kind of right size the remote environment for what your end users are doing specifically. And as a single license, it includes your support as well. So there's no extra charge for support. Full 24/7, 365 support is included. And also, whenever we release a new version of the product, you're entitled to go to the latest and greatest as soon as you're ready, right? There's no charge for the upgrades either. Okay. So that also helps you kind of streamline your IT management. As I've mentioned before, we can simplify the deployment of these desktops. There's a lot of configuration wizards that go through that will automate the tasks. There's a customizable set of tools that you can use that allows you to free up your time to focus on other products other than just managing this, right? And then the auto scaling, as I talked about, allows you to kind of scale up and scale down. So we can create these instances out on the cloud or even on your on-prem. We also can delete them. So if you've got like seasonal workload that goes up and down over the course of a year, we certainly can accommodate that automatically without you having to kind of think about, well, I got to pull this VM out of the mothballs, or I've got to redeploy some stuff, it can just automatically scale up and scale down for you. Okay, so how does Parallels RAS and Windows Virtual Desktop integration actually work? Well, we're talking directly to Azure. WVD is strictly an Azure construct, so we communicate directly with your Azure tenant. Once you've securely entered the credentials and all the information that you need that allows us to talk to it, we will see what you allowed us to see permissions to, and then we can configure components such as workspaces, host pools, app groups, host templates, etc. They can be deployed and managed through the Parallels RAS management console. So again, single pane of glass management for dealing with your remote infrastructure. The Parallels client, that's the piece of software that runs on the end user's workstation, will then connect to the Parallels RAS environment, and then on whether it's Microsoft Azure or hybrid or whatever, and it'll authenticate against the Azure Active Directory and your Active Directory, if you got them synced or separated or however you want to do that. It's always going to authenticate against an Active Directory of some kind, ultimately, because we don't store any kind of user information or anything like that. It's all controlled via the tools you already trust. It's then the client will then retrieve a list of the published resources. The published resources just means the stuff that you want the users to have access to. Different users may have different things. So some users may see this set of applications. Another group of users will see another set of applications. Other users may get a virtual desktop, whether it's a full-on VDI that they've got full control of. Perhaps it's a WVD instance, or maybe it's just a shared desktop off a terminal server so that they have the look and feel of the desktop, but they don't really need to install apps or do anything like that. You can mix and match and choose what they need to do, and the user just seamlessly launches whatever is available to them, and away they go. Very, very easy for the users to work. Effectively, they just log in and go, and I'll show you how that works in the demo. Okay, so the benefits, just to kind of sum up this, you got the simplified deployment and management. You have that flexibility of running it wherever your workloads, wherever you need to do, and also right-sizing the type of solution for your end users. We've got that FSLogix profile container integration built in. We can secure your data. We've got a lot of optimizations to make this run really fast. Not only optimizing their performance, but other things such as session pre-launch and so forth, and all of that will actually help you boost the productivity of your end users. So even though they may not be in the office, they can still work just as effectively as if they were. All right, so some of the use cases, well, it's kind of the best of both worlds, right? Parallels RAS, we've extended our VDI capability that we already have into the seamless integration with Windows WVD. And so because we've been doing this for a while, we didn't have to reinvent the wheel from scratch. So you can use a desktop as a service. You can use the Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session. We can, again, quickly meet user demands and enhance performance with image optimizations. And then we've also got that auto scaling, so we can kind of scale up and scale down. We've got a new user experience set of metrics that let you do troubleshooting about why are some users having trouble with performance and others aren't. I'll cover that in a minute. You can run it wherever you like, hybrid, at home, on-prem, using the cloud, using different cloud vendors if you want. There's nothing stopping you from doing that either. We're very capable of doing all of that. Specialized workloads and legacy apps, we support back to Windows Server 2008 for RDSH. And if you're doing just pure VDI, we support back to Windows 7. So you can definitely take advantage of some of those legacy workloads like that. And then I talked about the cost and optimization, right? A part of that is just the auto scaling up and down so that when you're not having resources being used, you can delete them on Azure or other cloud environments so that you're not paying the bill for you for stuff that you're not using, as you will, if you will. And then, of course, I mentioned our simplified licensing already. Okay, so real quick, just to talk about FSLogix, just so we can kind of see it. I'll demo this and I'll show you how easy it is to kind of set up. But you can see, just kind of looking at it, the integration is right here inside. This is just a RAS snapshot window, so you can integrate it from within the console. You can choose the location type, the format type. You can even start setting disk space or size limitations for your end users who aren't kind of blowing it up and just ever increasing, saving everything under the sun. You can give them some disk space limitations and a bunch of other settings. It allows you to do some superior profile management through this, right? It makes it really easy to do. And if you're already using the UPD, user profile disk, we've got some opportunities here where you can actually migrate and move to FSLogix using this. So very cool. And then the last thing I was going to talk about before we move on to the demo was the user experience evaluator and the advanced session details that are built into RAS. Essentially, we've added 25 new session detail metrics that help you kind of troubleshoot what's going on with the end user. If somebody starts complaining about they've got like slowness or non-responsive, and you're thinking, is it me? Is it them? Is it our side of the network? Is it just something out in the ether? I mean, I don't know. How do you know that, right? Because your IT responsibilities can only go so far before you're going out over the internet, and then who knows what the end users are connecting with. We can help you kind of evaluate that to figure out what's going on. Okay, so we've got these new metrics in there. You can pick and choose which ones you want to follow, or if you want to follow all of them. We've always been able to tell you certain things about like the IP address of the client and the name of the device, and now we've added the ability to look a little bit deeper into the operating system, like what client version from RAS are they using, what version of the operating system are they using, what operating system are they using. You can kind of figure that out on the workstation side, and then we can take that a step farther, because we can start evaluating what it's taking like for them to log in, right? Which pieces and components are doing it? What's the connection time? How long did it take to authenticate them? How about deploying a new host preparation? How long does it take to load those policies, both our policies and Microsoft group policies, GPO during login? What's the profile load time? How long did it take the desktop to actually finally pop up? So you can kind of look at all this to kind of get a better understanding of what the end user's experience is like. And then going, again, a step farther, we actually can kind of take a look at the connection quality. We have an overall rating from poor to excellent, but you also can look at the network latency. Are they using TCP over RDP, or we also perhaps enabling UDP over RDP, which can make a difference in terms of speed very often. Look at the bandwidth availability as seen from the client, right? What are they actually experiencing? Well, it's like this going out, so they're experiencing this. Maybe we can use some of the other RAS tools to kind of optimize the connection for what their bandwidth is. What are their reconnects like? Are they, and we exclude the graceful ones, like someone clicks the X, and closing the window out, and we'll exclude that. But are they disconnecting and reconnecting? Maybe they got some network issues in their house they should troubleshoot, right? We can take a look at all sorts of these things to provide you some information about how to troubleshoot these issues and give your users perhaps some information to troubleshoot. Maybe it's something going on in their own network, right? Oh, your kids are home and guess what they're doing on the network now, right? That kind of thing. It's in your house, it's not us. So at least you can kind of get an idea now and figure out what's going on with that. All right, and then here's some other connection details that we have. A very cool one is right there at the bottom, which is the flow. We actually can figure out what they're connecting to. So instead of just, I know they're coming through a load balancer and through a gateway, which load balancer, which gateway they're connecting through. Maybe this one is a little overutilized and I need to throw some more resources at it, or perhaps add another gateway, a RAS gateway. These are the Parallels products that we can kind of look at very closely, right? Or not even products, just pieces of the remote application server solution. What's their connection mode? Are they tunneling through the gateway? Is the gateway working like a traffic cop? What are they doing for an authentication type? Is it just regular credentials? Maybe it starts falling apart and we're doing the handoffs to SAML. Maybe we got a problem with our SAML environment that's slowing things down. Are they using multi-factor authentication? Which one? Maybe if we're running two because of an acquisition, one's working better than the other, we can kind of figure that out, at least doing this. So all this is kind of available for you in that. I'm going to demo and show you what this looks like, as well as FSLogix and as well as WVD. So speaking of that, why don't we get down to it? So let's go ahead and switch over to the Windows Virtual Desktop demo. And we'll start by taking a look at some of the components like the architecture. If we take a look at the architecture, as I said, it is very much based on Microsoft's own stuff up in Azure. They've got their own way of doing it, their own way of deploying it. We can't just, unfortunately, integrate and deploy it just like we would a remote desktop server, right? Wouldn't that be just easy if we could just pick that and do it? But nope, they've got their own implementation up there, and so we're going to have to integrate with that. So there's a couple of layers of this to kind of get it to working. One of the things that we must do, of course, is we can run in single or multi-session WVD hosts, but that means we're going to have to lay down two different agents on it. We've got to have a desktop agent to treat it as a desktop, and at the same time, a management agent like we would add on the remote desktop server for the WVD server or host, I guess. Kind of hard to think of Windows 10 as a server, for instance, but we would add both of those on there, and that allows us to kind of manage it in both ways at once. It's a little bit different in that regard. The other thing too, and this is a bit of a Microsoft limitation just to kind of keep in mind, is that it only works using the Parallels client for Windows. And that again is because we're brokering and doing the connection, but we're also having to hand it off to the WVD desktop as well. So because of that, you can really only use the Parallels client for Windows in order to get this to work. So if you're coming from a Mac, you're not going to be able to use WVD. If you want to use the HTML5 only interface or an iPad or something like that, again, you're going to have to go with the Parallels client. That's just kind of a Microsoft limitation. There's a lot of steps to this because we do have to run it up on Azure. We do have to integrate in there with it. We've got some knowledge base articles that will allow you to walk you kind of through this. The first one is what you call it the prerequisites, but it's really just walking you through the Azure side, what you have to do up in the Azure AD, register your apps, set the permissions, and so forth. There's a follow-on document there for configuration. We'll walk you through that. And then one resource I don't want you to forget about too is the admin guide. The prereq document in particular and a little bit of the configuration document, but they assume you know a little something about Azure, and if they just show you pictures, you'll instantly be able to browse and go there. It is possible if you're not super familiar with Azure that you can be going right down that prerequisites document and then kind of get lost. Like, where does this go? What is that step? We seem to have jumped here. It's just an assumption that was made that, you're kind of familiar with Azure. It's not our product. That's part of why it was done that way. However, the administrator guide has a lot more detail. It doesn't have all the pictures, but it's got a lot more detail. So if you're going down one of these other two knowledge base articles and then you kind of get lost a little bit, switch over to the admin guide and pull that up as a reference, and that will often bridge the gaps. In fact, it will just about always bridge the gaps. So kind of keep that up there as well. In between those, you should be able to not have too much trouble to get through this. And then the final knowledge base article is there are some client-side requirements. I talked about Windows, but Windows clients rather, but also if you're going to be, there's some other requirements on there as well. Generally, a fully patched Windows 10 should work, but if you're connecting from an older Windows client, such as say Windows 7, there may be a couple other things that you've got to do. Okay, and then as we kind of go through some of these requirements and tips real quick, just ahead of the demo, keep in mind that if you're going to wanted to use Windows 7 WVD, that's not supported by RAS. We're doing purely Windows 10 at this point. We do recommend that, if you're going to be managing WVD within RAS, you keep managing WVD within RAS. Don't switch over and try to manually manage it on the Azure side. That can break things and break the link between Parallels and Microsoft Azure as far as the WVD is concerned. So it could make you lose that WVD host. There are ways to recover from that. There's some knowledge base articles there, and support, of course, can help, but it's best just not to get in that in the first place. So if you're going to use WVD with Parallels, manage that WVD instances with Parallels. And then, of course, I did mention it's going to require just the Parallels client for Windows only. That's just kind of the nature of the beast in terms of where we are. And also keep your Azure subscription information handy right in front of you, because you can see from the screenshot, we are going to be having to add in a lot of this information here. Part of it's already filled out for you, that's the subscription details, but the rest of it, you're going to have to do some copy and paste. And as I'm talking about that, I got to say that copy and paste functionality down on the IDs down here and the keys are a little finicky. It can be kind of hard. You can't just have your cursor sitting in there and then get a nice copy and paste. What I was doing was just doing the tab. So I'd kind of have my cursor up there in the name, get that typed in, tab down to description, credentials, and then tab down to the tenant ID. And then that would create like a little blue box there. It doesn't look like it fills up all the dashes. It just fills up the first dash. But if you just leave it there and then just simply do a paste, don't click around in it, but just leave it there and then do a paste. It'll properly paste in the IDs. So that's my little pro tip for this, because it is a little bit finicky, I was finding. This part, as I mentioned, the subscription details should be pre-populated, so you shouldn't have to worry about that part, at least filling it in. The tenant ID and the subscription ID, well, those are just your Azure identification keys, right? So those are up to you. You guys should have those and know where to get those. The application ID, this is the actual application ID itself. You're going to be generating, as you create this, a secret key for this application ID, and the secret key has its own ID. Everything up on Azure, every little entity up there is going to have its own ID. So if you grab the secret key, which you need to grab, don't forget to get that when you're going through the knowledge base article for the prereqs. Remember, it's got the key itself, and then it's got the ID. That ID is not what you want to plug in here. You actually want to plug in the WVD ID when you create that. And then the secret key, that goes in here. Again, this is kind of in the knowledge base articles and in the admin guide, but I just wanted to call that out a little bit more, just so we kind of have that. Okay, and with that, let's go ahead and switch over and see this in action. Okay, so I've got a pre-built RAS environment ready to go. It's fully functional. I'm just going to go ahead and take advantage of the Start Wizard to get us going here, though. Okay, and the first step is to enable the feature. It's actually disabled by default. You can do it through the wizard here, or if you go to Farm Settings, there's a Features tab. You can enable it there, which will take you right here. Generally, you'd want to put it on the publishing agent unless you need to redistribute it for some reason. Then we'll need to download the agent itself, and then the feature set, there's standard, which is just the standard WVD features. Advanced adds in a lot of the RAS features like printer redirection and so forth that you can find very useful. And then there's also a fallback where it'll try the RAS Advanced and then go back to the standard if you need to. And since it's already downloaded, I'll just click Next, which takes us to the provider page. This is the Azure integration, so I'll give it a name, WVD. You can add additional credentials if you like, other than the ones that I'm logged in with. You just click on the little blue plus here, see if I can type this in, and then it'll just follow these sequential. So go ahead and click OK. And now we need to type in the keys. So I'll type in our tenant and subscription IDs, that application ID, and the secret key. And then I'll click Next, and then we'll click Finish, which will launch the Windows Virtual Desktop Workspace Wizard. Okay, and then in the workspace, we can either create a new workspace or select an existing one. I could browse through here on Azure AD and see what's up there, but let's go ahead and create a new workspace. So I'll just simply call it RAS underscore workspace, feeling creative here. And then so it's validated, we need to select a resource group, so I'll do that. And we've got a lot up here. Let's see, I'll search on, I don't know, prod, and there we go. Western Europe, sure, why not? Okay, and that's done. I'll go ahead and click Next. And then we'll go ahead and launch the virtual desktop host pool. And we're going to go ahead and we can create a pool or select from an existing one. I'm going to go ahead and give it a name. I'll call it WVD Desktops. This is the pool for them. And then go on to Next, because we're creating a new pool. And there's some different options here. I'm just going to do desktops. The only thing I'll change, go Next. I could do template or standalone. Let's just do standalone to speed things up, which means I need to go find one. Let me search. I'll just type in prod again, because I know there's some named that. And here's a few. These are actual virtual desktops, WVDs themselves. I'll pick this one. We'll go Next. Here's our Active Directory integration. What I'm doing here is allowing the users that will have the rights to access this. So I'm going to search on the WVD users and add them and click Next. And I'm going to skip the optimizations just so we can go a little bit faster here in the setup at least, and then go Next. And then that takes us back to the RAS console. If I go up to Farm, you'll see this new item up here, Windows Virtual Desktop. Let me go ahead and click Apply. And then we'll let this go ahead and verify and deploy. But here's where you can kind of go in and review a lot of the settings that we just did. You also can deploy the whole thing from here as well using that little blue plus up in the top right. You can see we're installing the agents, it's getting there. And then in just a minute, I'm going to speed this video up quite a bit here so we don't have to wait for all this to deploy out on Azure and talk. There we go, right? And now it's green, and we're all good. Okay. Okay, if we just click on refresh here, we'll go ahead and see that the agent's updated. Okay, so what actually happened on the back end? Let's go back into the Azure portal. And we'll actually go and look at the virtual machine itself, and you'll notice that we added some tags. These tags were added via the API that RAS is calling to talk to them. And I also can go look at, I'll type in WVD desktops here and click that. And we'll look at the application group and take a look at the assignment here. And you can see the WVD users we pulled up. I'll type in WVD again, and this time I'll actually go into the host pool, and you can see we've got a session host that's actually running in there that's been created and being used. And inside the application group, if you take a look at that, you'll see the RAS tags there as well. Okay, so that's kind of what was done on the Azure side. Again, we don't want to make too many changes in these groups and these WVD resources on the Azure side like that, because we can interfere with that link between that and RAS. I just wanted to show you what was done. Okay, so let's go back over to our RAS console, and if I go down to publishing and click add, let's go ahead and deploy some resources. I'll do a desktop next. Notice there's a new option here, Windows Virtual Desktop. Next, there it is. That's the one we just provisioned. I'll just give it a friendly name, WVD Desktop, so we know what we're clicking on. And we'll go ahead and click Finish, and then Apply. And now if I switch back over to my client, and this is again a Windows client, I'll refresh it, and then there's my W10 desktop just showed up, and I'll go ahead and watch it. And then what's happening is that we are actually interacting with the Windows Virtual Desktop service up in Azure. And because, remember, when we provision this, we set it up as standard, it's going to use the WVD services. So it's going to give us a password prompt right here. If I chose advanced, it makes it a little bit more seamless to the end user, and they wouldn't see that. But this way they get to, I set it like that just so we can kind of understand what's happening, because we actually are kind of leaving Parallels at this point and moving into the WVD service. And there's the desktop. I bumped the resolution down so we could see the different windows here. And if I go back over to Azure, we can actually see it. So I'll go to WVD desktops, we'll go to the session hosts, and you can see I've got one active session, and I can even go in and go into the details and drill down a little bit. So it's all right there, pulling this up on Azure as you go through. If I go back to the RAS console, I can see the sessions from here. So again, you don't need to do that. If I just go to virtual desktops, I can see that here's the host that's connected, and then under sessions, here's my active users that I've got, right? And then I can look at the show processes. I can kind of manage the whole session from here, just like we kind of always do. So it's the same experience we have on a regular traditional stuff. I can send a message, hello, right, to the end users. And then if I go back to the virtual desktop, you can see they get this. So the exact same experience that they get. Okay, let's go ahead and get out of this. Okay, let's go back over to the RAS console, and let's do applications this time. So I'll go back to my Windows Virtual Desktop. I'll go back to the host pools and click on the boot plus. And this time we'll do another host, right? Call this one WVD apps. Next, and switch it, or keep it, I guess, at application, because that's the default. Go to next. Let's do another standalone instead of the template. Next. And then I need to go find a host. So I'll go back into the same area I was before. That was under prod. And I'll pick a different WVD instance. There we go. And I'll go to next. And then I'll add my users that I want to access this. So I'll go with WVD users. And okay, they're in there. And next. And again, I'm going to turn off the optimization just so this will go quicker from a deployment standpoint. And next. And the deployment's in progress there. Okay, we can go back into the host pool and host and see what's going on. It starts off as broken. That's just while we're starting to talk to it, and it's going to quickly prepare. I sped this part of the clip up dramatically so we wouldn't have to wait. It's not horribly long, but it does take a few minutes to install all the agents and get everything verified, get the signaling straight. And there we go. Okay, it's okay. So I'll refresh, maybe another refresh. It's still finishing up a few things on the back end. While it's doing this, let's go over to Azure and take a look. So here's the session host. Let me go back up into my resource group, and I'll type in WVD app, which is the new one we called. That'll refresh Azure, and you can see there it is. That's the new one we just created. And if I drill into that, into the host pool, you can see it's there. It's just not quite available just yet. If I go into the application group, you could manage the assignments here. You can see there it is to the end user. So it's getting all of this kind of done on the back end for us. And it's just about be ready to go in just a minute. Okay, so mostly I just want to show you how both sides of the equation, because we're interacting with both. Let's go back to the RAS console and let's use this. Let's go into publishing. We'll go down to add. Let's do an application this time, again, from a Windows virtual desktop. Next, very similar, right, to what we're doing before, installed apps, yep, from here. And then it's going to query the Windows inventory if your app is registered there. And let's see what's on the system. And oh, it's got the Office suite. Let's pick, let's just grab one. Oh, Word's down here at the bottom. So I'll publish Word. How exciting. Okay, next. And there we go, finish. And then I'll go ahead and click apply. And then now it's published and available for my end users. So if I go back to my Windows workstation and refresh my client here, there's Word. So I can go ahead and launch Word. And again, this is coming from WV Desktop. And remember, we left it at standard. So it is going to prompt me again for the password. And this is kind of that handoff back and forth between the WVD system. You can hide a lot of this again by choosing advanced. And remember, there's also the advanced with a fallback to this if you have to for whatever reason. Log in, it's starting my app on the desktop and configuring the remote session. And then here we go. There's Office. I'm in Microsoft Word, right? So I can launch one of the predefined templates here. It's again that very same experience that the end user should be used to in RAS, the seamless window for just Word. You notice down there it's actually using the Microsoft. If you look at the little icon, it's using the remote app. That's another reason it's Windows only, because Microsoft uses remote app, which only works for Windows. And if I launch IE, that's got the Parallels logo because that's actually using our own shell. So I can kind of bounce back and forth between both, right? And particularly if I had on that advanced option instead of the standard, the users would have a very seamless experience between WVD and traditional remote desktop services. So they could use RDSH for most things, but perhaps use WVD for application compatibility. Okay, and that is how you configure WVD in RAS. Next, I want to show you how the integration that we have with FSLogix for profile management works. So let's flip over to the server side. First of all, we need to enable the feature. So to do that, we just go up to Farm and then Settings, and then click on Features, and then just kind of turn it on, right? And you got a few different options here. I can just install it manually. I could install it from an online. I could install it from a network share, or I could push it out from the RAS agent. You know, some of those you do have to download and copy it out first. I usually just do online because it's a lot easier. So, or at least less steps that I need to do, not necessarily easier. So I'll do that. We do support a couple of different versions. You could pick the version of FSLogix that you are going to use. Just kind of make your choice there, whichever one you like. I'll just go with this one for now, and then we click apply. Okay, the next step would be to go back over to the RD session hosts under Farm, RD session host, and then I'm just going to modify this to the group setting. So this is a way to do it to an existing environment already. So I'll go into the groups, I'll go into user profile, and instead of doing it for the whole site, I'm going to make sure it applies to just this particular group. Set it to FSLogix, SMB, or Cloud Cache. I'm going to use an SMB location here, and then I've already got a path already set. So it's ready to go, really. And then I can change a couple other parameters down here as well, such as the format, the type, the file size. If I go into the properties, you can see that I can set up which users and groups this applies to. I'm just going to let it go for everyone. I can pick which folders should be redirected outside of a user's profile. And then there's also this advanced tab. A lot of these settings are GPO settings. That's how you normally would manage it in FSLogix, but we have it here, so that you can just do it in a single pane of glass, so it makes it a lot easier. You can kind of scroll down and see all the settings right here. So this is what it is to retroactively do it as I click apply. However, you also can do this as you deploy infrastructure as well. So there's a little wizard that'll pop up. You saw it in the checkbox as you're deploying new systems if you've been installing on version 18 or later, and then you can actually kick all this off during that, provided you've enabled the feature up there, of course. And it works across all the platforms that we support. So it does it for RD Session Host, but also for VDI and Windows WVD as well. And for the last topic in the demo, I want very quickly to show you the user experience evaluator feature. And if I go into the session management, the sessions, you can see all these new metrics that are available up here that you can kind of get into and really experience, and including the experience evaluator, which gives you some of the latency settings, the transport protocol they're using, the session length, just a wealth of information. And what's really cool is you can drill down even further. So if I right click on this one and go to full screen, you can see much more detail and a little bit easier in terms of what's going on across the entire experience. And then if I right click again and go into show information, now I've got a lot of detail about any individual user and what's going on. I can even export it and send it out to a file that you can evaluate later or ship off somewhere, whatever it is you need to do. You can see the connection quality, the latency, bandwidth available, all sorts of stuff. So very, very cool and a very powerful tool here. You can even see the connection mode and type, gateway mode, SSL, the authenticated just using credentials as opposed to two-factor authentication or something like that. I mean, there's just a ton of information as we kind of look down through here. How long it took to load the user profile, the desktop load time, just everything. So you can really, it's not just what the end users are telling you, you can kind of see it. So that will wrap up our demo for today. And with that, we're already getting some feedback from a lot of our customers that have been very pleased with testing and trying this out and running it in production. So I'll let you kind of read through the quote there. And let's move on towards the wrap up here. Just as a very quick summary of the key benefits, remember Parallels is an all-in-one solution so that you can run your virtual desktops, your apps, anywhere, anytime, any device without having to change your licensing. One license gives you everything that you need from that single pane of glass, and that provides a superior user experience on any device, anywhere, enhanced data security so that you can keep your data behind your firewall and on your servers where it belongs instead of out on the end user device. We provide a lot of flexibility, which allows you to be very agile in deciding where to put things and what type of solutions and remote environment you need for your end users. And then again, very, very important is it's very easy to deploy, configure, and maintain. So you can get up and running very quickly, and it's very easy to kind of keep it running because we've engineered a lot of the complexity out of this. And all of that combines to kind of provide a very robust and great end user experience, but also keeps your TCO costs down. All right, so we can help organizations here by providing a high performance, intuitive, and productive remote working experience from any device from pretty much anywhere. And allows your organization to, again, kind of right size what it is they need to do, provide the right type of platform for the specific end users you want, and then again, kind of reduce the risk of data loss and other malicious activity. So to go ahead and get started, we do encourage you to do a POC. You can kind of scan here and that'll take you up to the, we have trials up on Microsoft Azure. We also have one on Amazon Web Services, but if you want to do WVD, that's going to be in Microsoft Azure. You also can do a download and try RAS on your own infrastructure. So there's nothing, encourage you to kind of do that as well. To go ahead and give it a shot. And you'll see very much how easy it is to do this. We get a free full 30-day trial. There's no limits to, it's not like the functionality is reduced anywhere in the software. It's limited during the trial period only by the time frame of 30 days. And with that, it's kind of all I had. So I wanted to thank you so much for attending today. And if there's any questions, we'll go ahead and answer those in the chat window. But thanks so much, everybody.